Hi, welcome to U.S. history. So we just finished a great session of world history with Laura. And now we're going to do an hour of U.S. history with me. I'm David, and my off-camera teacher helper is going to be Heather. She is awesome, and you can ask her questions, and she'll help you out. One of the best things, we want you guys to be a part of it. Talk to us in the chat, answer questions. We're going to have questions. We're going to have timers, all of that. And so this is going to be cool. We're going to talk about U.S. history. Go ahead and tell me in the chat, what is your favorite era of U.S. history? What is your favorite era of U.S. history? Because, we all have a different one that you like, learning about. Like personally, I detested the Old West, studying that time. Also, not early 1900s, not my favorite. But anyway, tell me what you think. What do you guys like? What is your favorite era as well? While we're doing that, I'm gonna pull my screen up so we can get rolling with stuff. All right. So we're going to have fun today. We're going to be talking about the early years, things that just, when things were first getting started. So Gilded Age, early 20th century. Like Gatsby and all that stuff. Yeah. The Roaring 20s. So that's cool that you like that stuff. I'm not as huge of a fan of that era, but it's okay because you can be, and it's perfectly fine. We're okay with that. So we're gonna have a good time. I said that already, but I really feel it deep in my bones. So what are we gonna cover today? We're gonna talk about the Europeans coming over. We're gonna talk about slavery and the triangular trade. Now, I didn't say we're gonna be talking about happy topics today. In fact, these are some of the worst. But we have to still cover them because they still are on the test and they are high point values. So basically our course that we have is broken down into 8 main need to know topics. Everything we're going over today comes from this book, our AP US History prep book that just came out this year. And so it breaks things down. There's 8 main topics that have been identified that you need to know. And so these are the first 2. They're unpleasant. The thing is that we have to remember to see history through the eyes of who was living in that time. And in that time, those decisions had been made. We don't have to like them. We just have to know about them. And so we want to make sure that we still study and everything, and that the information that we answer on the test is based on the historical evidence that we have been given. Opinion, unfortunately, doesn't really go into it. So these are the 8 topics that we cover. And you can see we're doing the first 2 today, and then we're doing 1 every other day. Like for tomorrow, we're going to cover Congress, Confederation, and Constitution. And then next week, we're doing 1 a day all week, Monday through Friday at the same exact time. And so this is going to be our fun time together. So today, let's get started on the Europeans in America. Pre-1492, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. There were millions of American Indians, diverse societies, tons of languages. Also, there's a really good book if you're into this particular era of history. There's a really good book called 1491 that is kind of like trying to look and see what did the Americas look like before the Europeans showed up. Very enlightening, very, very enlightening. Then also the New York Times did a really nice series of articles about the 400th anniversary of the slave trade, not a celebration, but like just acknowledging it. and it had some really, really interesting stuff in there as well. You know, if you're just wanting to as you're home, you know, you can look at some of that stuff, and that might be interesting to you. But the natives, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, they were not all nomads. They were not, you know, crazy and all of the things that the Europeans labeled them with, savages. That was not the actual case. And they had societies that had structure, and a lot of them were permanent. And so that's the reality of what was coming. Most of the stuff that actually came that we know was like basically propaganda that the Europeans were spreading. But in the 1500s, there became like this war between the different, not a real war, but like a race. It's a race. There was a race between these different countries, France, Spain, Portugal, England, and the Netherlands, to start exploring the New World. So why did they explore the New World? This is something that you want to make sure that you know, the list of why. Anyone remember what some of the reasons were? You can tell me that in the chat if you do. Why in the world they would be coming all the way over here to just, I mean, was it just for fun, for the adventure of it all? Some of it may have been, but there were other things as well. And one was travel. I mean, they knew Asia. They knew Asia. They knew there was a land route to Asia. But they're like, is there a different way? Because, you know, it would be a lot better if we could sail to Asia and not have to walk through and travel through all of these other dangerous places. I mean, yeah, I can sell things along the way, but I also might get robbed. And so, yeah, so Brooke just mentioned that, the sea route to Asia. Yeah, that's it. Trying to find it. Mali gained territory and wanting power. Yeah, that's going to be another one that pops up here. Northwest Passage was another way that they were looking for a route, maybe across land, but the other way, like going over. Trade, they wanted to get more things. They wanted to be able to sell more things, and getting the resources, definitely. The search for wealth, gaining that territory, like Molly is saying, is important because the more territory you have, the more powerful you look, but also the more resources you're pulling in. If you think about it, that's like, man, all of a sudden I'm able to get gold and the silver and tobacco and wood and all this stuff that I didn't have access to. I mean, you look at the countries that are sending people, they're not all like large. I mean, you've got the UK and Netherlands and Portugal, they're smaller, and so they could use a new resource place to come, you know, get stuff. Civilize and convert, that's going to be Spain. It's like Spain, that was one of their big things, was like, we're going to civilize everybody, we're going to convert them to Catholicism. And so if you ever see that, civilize and convert, you know immediately that they're talking about Spain. And then some of them were just, people wanted to go live there. They just wanted to live there, you know. And so that's going to be the ones who came over for a permanent thing, that they were escaping prejudice or persecution or whatever. So here we go. We've got 5 documents. One of the big things is that they ask about documents. You've got to know about documents, and there also are going to be questions involving documents. And so knowing the documents is going to be helpful. I know in our book we cover a lot of them so that you will know just, you know, all of them. But this is 5 in particular. I'm going to actually run a 5-minute timer, and I'm going to a 5-minute. No, I'm not. That's a lie. It's a dirty lie. I'm going to run a 1-minute timer, and let you guys see if you can match these up. You know, you can jot them down or whatever, or you can put them in the chat when you do it. That's fine too. And then we'll kind of look at them together. So let me give you a minute and have fun. Alrighty. We have reached 0. So we're going to look at these and you can check off as we go through. So fundamental orders of Connecticut. Fundamental orders of Connecticut. This is going to be called for the power of government from the governed. And so you did not need to be church members. So that was what made this unique. Basically, what you should do with these documents is try to find was there one single thing that kind of made it stand out to where you can remember that better. So like kind of catch the gist of it, the one thing that makes it a little bit unique. Fundamental constitutions of Carolina. I actually live in Carolina. I live in South Kakalaki. And when I think of Carolina, both in futuristic post-apocalyptic books and in old books, agriculture is one of the big things, swamps and agriculture. And so this is going to be that feudal society with nobles, serfs, and slaves. Noble, serfs, feudal, yeah, it's working everywhere else. It's been a big hit other places. So let's go ahead and put that in the Carolinas. The body of liberties, liberties, anything that when you're looking at that, probably a good option is that there's going to be about what people are allowed to do. But they're not allowed to do blasphemy or witchcraft. So they are allowed to do some stuff, but there is apparently a limit to just how much the body of liberties could take. Mayflower Compact, Mayflower Moving Company, they were the first to move in, therefore the first written form of government. Since they were the first, they had to have something. And then the last one, the Charter of Liberties. So this is different than the body of liberties. We now have the Charter of Liberties and Privileges. This is going to include mandatory elections, male property owners and freemen could vote. This is, this is pretty normal for a lot of those things, is the whole male part. And freemen could also vote. All right. So one of the very common question types on the test is going to be where they give you a primary source and you have to read it and then you have to answer questions about it. And so the multiple choice, which is this is a part of multiple choice, you have an average of a minute per question. It's like, yeah, that's great, but I can't do that all the time because sometimes I have to read these things. And so your guide is not just to run a minute timer per question. You want to get the questions done as quickly as you can so you have time to read things like this. And so like this has a passage and 2 questions. So that's 2 minutes. I would probably say, let's take 2 minutes to go and read this and then do both questions. So that's kind of like how you would do it on test day, is like if you're just trying to time yourself, is like, okay, I'll get all of this done in 2 minutes. The other thing though is that these passages do not always have where the answers have to come out of them. Sometimes they don't come out of them. Sometimes it's just referencing a particular time period or something like that. And so then the questions will be tied to it, but the answers won't necessarily come out of it. And so you kind of, don't waste a ton of time reading if you look at the questions and they both are ones you could answer without it. So, all right, so here we go. This is the passage. I'm actually going to give you guys a minute to look at this one. And then we're going to have a couple questions that we're going to talk about. And so go ahead and let me get the timer reset for a minute. And you can go for it. So not the prettiest of pictures, not the happiest thing that you could possibly write about. This De las Casas is definitely not pro Spain, not happy with how this is done. He's saying, I don't know how you can possibly think that what you're doing is okay. This is awful. This is not a good thing. And so definitely want to take that into account when we are thinking about what questions may come into play. It's not bad as far as like, you know, coming up with some basic like summation of the thing, which is, you know, okay, this is not good. And then you kind of can like see how to deal with the questions. So like this one right here, looking at question 1, if you go back to the passage, it doesn't mention any of these things. And so this is one of those questions where it's just kind of referencing that time period or what they're talking about. And so this is where our general knowledge would have to come in. And so go ahead and figure out, number 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 30 seconds for each question, kind of like what we said, 2 minutes for like the passage and the 2 questions. So do 30 seconds and tell us in the chat what one you think it is. And then we'll talk about that. Okie dokie. That is 30 seconds. It's pretty quick, but I mean, thinking about the type question types, it's not math. We're not working it out. It's not science. We're not working it out. Something like this, it's like, do you know it or not? You know, can you go back and find it or not? And so timing, you know, if you don't, that's, I mean, that's a goal to have too, is to make sure you're moving quickly. If there's a question that you're just like, I don't know what that is, I wouldn't spend a ton of time answering it. I would pick a letter and move on, because it's not going to benefit you to sit there and stare at the wall trying to figure it out. The teacher's covered up all the posters, and so you can't do that. And besides, you may be home for this test, and I don't think you have the answers to it on the wall either. And so in this particular case, it is going to be the encomienda system is what they are talking about. The encomienda system. Hacienda system developed from the encomienda system. And then the encomienda system is basically them taking lands and saying, oh, but you can stay here and work on it. Well, thanks. And so that's kind of what went on there. And that's what De las Casas is angry about, is criticizing. And then number 2 is asking us about De las Casas specifically. What about him on his own? And so go ahead and think that over. What is he best known for? And then we'll talk about that. Okay, so De las Casas. Now here's the thing. There is a powerful, powerful tool that you have at your disposal. It's on your disposal for every standardized test. And it's something that we really encourage our students to use. And that is elimination. Elimination is a very, very powerful thing. On your test day tool belt, that should be one of your go-to tools. It's like the Phillips head screwdriver of your tool belt. You're going to use it a lot. Even if I don't know this clown at all, I still could get this answer just by eliminating my way to it. Okay, so let's look at these answer choices and see, can we eliminate some of the answer choices? advocating for the forceful conversion of indigenous people. We just read him angry about that. So that's not what he's doing. So B is out of there. Suppressing native people. Again, no. So now it comes down to A and D. So now you have a 50-50 choice, even if you didn't know anything about this guy, because just from reading his passage, you'll know he does not do B or C. So there is speaking out or starting missions. Which one of those, think? Which one of those is going to be more time intensive and all of that? Do we remember? I mean, starting missions, that's a pretty big deal. Speaking out is also a big deal, but it's not like sitting, you know, you have to be there for a while to do these things. And he didn't build missions, but he did speak out against the atrocities. And so that's where I'm going to head. It's going to be answer choice A. D is too far. He's doing too much because he wasn't actually involved in building anything. So I mean, that you could narrow it down to A and D right there, and then pick between the two. And hopefully you'd pick A. You know, if it was 50-50, I mean, you would pick one of them, obviously. But A, maybe you could do that because the other one just seemed like I would have heard of him better if he had done a lot of these things. So moving to need to know concept number 2. So the first, you can see 1 and 2 kind of bleed into each other. No pun intended, but it could definitely be one. But they merge together. Early European, you know, colonization and the slave and triangular trade. So in 1620, the first ever slave ship appeared off the coast of the New World. That's the thing I mentioned from the New York Times was it's involved in talking about this. And that is when it first began. That's where that first happened. Originally, Brazil and the West Indies were going to be more of the target for those slave ships. The North America, it took them a while to do it because they didn't need them at first. This triangle that they're talking about, this triangle of trade, you're going to see raw materials are going from the United States, or sorry, from North America, and they weren't the United States at that time, from North America to Europe. So they're getting all those the resources, the raw materials that they were wanting so badly. Then Europe is going to put all of that into their manufacturing system, and that's going to head down into Africa, where it's going to have a whole new place to buy things, a whole new group of people to buy from you. And then the slaves are going to come from Africa and head over, and it's just going to keep going, making this triangle. So knowing what goes where, you know, again, think of it like resources, goods, people, like that. It just, even if you just did that, to remember the 3 legs of the triangle. In 1793, you had the invention of the cotton gin, that fertile southern land, the warm climate that lets you grow things almost all year. King Cotton becomes the driving force, and this plantation system develops. And so it's not, now all of a sudden there is a huge market, a huge need for slaves in the South, in North America. And so they start purchasing them in mass, and it completely changes the economy and everything. One of the, I mean, just so you, I mean, thinking about this, because they do ask about economy and they do ask about like how things tie together. That's one of the big things on this test is like the threads and how one event leads to one event leads to one event. And they could ask you like, how were women approached in this era versus this era versus this era versus this era, or, you know, minorities, how they were dealt with in each of the eras. And so understanding the big themes, the big threads is going to be very important for questions, especially those short answer ones in the essays. And so one of the reasons that North America was able to grow so quickly, one of the reasons the United States was able to grow so quickly was that they did not have one of the production costs that Europe had in that labor. Europe was paying their workers, the South was not. And so the United States was able to produce and all of this stuff because they had no labor costs in the South. And so that's horrible. But it also is like, one of the things about history to understand is how that actually happened. And so as an entire economy is built on that, the slave trade, the existence of slavery, that's why the South is going to be so, stubborn about doing away with it, because they're like, we're going to lose our entire workforce, in addition to the mindset that they had at that time, which was horrific as well. So we got another one of these matching things. We're going to give you a minute to look at it and find the different colonies and then match them to your exports, and then we'll discuss what those are after your minute. So let's go ahead. I'm going to start it now. Nope, that was 30 seconds. I'm going to do a minute, not 30 seconds. There we go. Minute is up. You don't have to worry about this being like a test-like question where you have to, I have a minute to do these. These aren't on the test. But they may say, which of the following do the middle colonies export? And then you would get those 4 answers and you'd have to pick the right one. So we've got the middle colonies, Southern Chesapeake, New England. Middle colonies, that's going to be stuff like grains, cereal crops, wheat, like still are there. And then the southern colonies, you're going to have a variety of things, because remember we did have that, it say very rich soil, also cotton. That's not listed because it would have been a giveaway, and so there also were other crops being raised there. Chesapeake, this is going to be like Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland. As soon as you say the Virginia, North Carolina, you should think of tobacco, tobacco, tobacco. And then that leaves New England through elimination: fish, furs, lumber, and Tom Brady. And so that is going to be the main exports that are going on with those areas. Okay, so we've got another question here, number 3. So why did slavery come to existence and then grow in British North America, especially if you take into account that Britain had outlawed it? So think about what it could be, and we're going to give you a minute to work on that one, and tell us in the chat what you think it is. What is the reason for it? Which letter? Sorry about the slide jumping back. The computer really liked that one. So slavery, why did slavery evolve in British North America? And again, we can do some elimination if we need to. We can do some elimination if we need to. So slaves were brought with the first settlers. No, they weren't. The settlers barely made it. They weren't going to bring anyone else with them. That was not going to happen. So not A. Slavery was developed after the deaths of thousands of enslaved American Indians. That would mean that the thousands of American Indians had been the workers prior, which was not really the case. I mean, we talked about the encomienda system where that did happen, but that was not the British North America. So it's not going to be B. C, Anglican Church actively encouraged the transport. No, the church didn't encourage that. Because remember, it's illegal in England. So it's not going to be that. Which leaves us, the only other option is D, but that is the correct option because originally most of the workers were indentured servants working off debts. That was one of the reasons people would come, was that they could work off their debt and then get to be able to go buy land and all that stuff on their own. And that's one of the reasons that slavery did not start immediately in North America, was that there already was a workforce. And so when the workforce disappeared, they had to start filling it in somewhere because they didn't want to pay for workers. That's the thing. When it was indentured servants, they weren't paying for it. And then when it was slaves, they weren't paying for it. And so they were never planning on paying for it. And so that's why slavery evolved. All right, number 4. Let's look at number 4 together. I want you to think about something when we look at this. Which of the following colonies initially banned the practice of slavery? Well, pay attention to the wording. I don't want to give it away, but I just pay attention to the wording as you're answering it. We'll give you another minute and put your answer into our chat and let us know what you think it is. Okay, our minute is up. Brooke, you made the exact deduction that I wanted you to make. Which of the following colonies initially banned the practice of slavery? So this is why we tell you to read every single word in questions, because that's going to make me think, wait a minute, it's not, is that saying that they did it at first and then they didn't do it anymore? The North, it's banned and it's banned, and so once it's banned, it's gone. And so they didn't, some of them went from allowing it to not allowing it, but who went from not allowing it to allowing it? So I'm going to, immediately, just like Brooke was saying, I'm going to knock Massachusetts and New York out of there. It's either Georgia or Virginia. So then I'm going to think, what was the way these colonies started? Who ran them? Things like that. Virginia, they had slaves really early on, okay? Georgia, though, remember, these were prisoners. Remember, Georgia was a prison colony, or at least part of it was. And so it's not, they don't need those workers. In fact, they having slaves there actually could be counterproductive to what Georgia was trying to do. And so that's going to be why C is the correct answer, is that they just didn't allow it at first. And so that initially gives us such a big clue. That's awesome that helped. Okay, so let's actually switch on over. We actually have some extra questions that we're going to go through. We've got some directly from our book, actually, which is pretty awesome. So here is our, this is a direct, these are actually, this is a PDF of our actual book. We're actually taking you through this. One of the things I wanted to show you is this long question type. We did a lot of multiple choice. Well, let's look and see what the actual essay type thing would be. So you'd get a prompt, kind of like what we've got here on screen. And here is, hold on, I think I've got, look. Sorry. Crazy computer guy, stop scam, you're gonna make us sick. Here we go. Okay, so evaluate the extent to which the migration of European colonists and the resulting encounters with American Indians affected social patterns. So this is one of the things that we want to talk about, is like finding exactly what they're wanting us to do, social patterns. So that's going to be our goal. We're not talking necessarily about economy. We're not talking necessarily about military. We're talking about social patterns. So we're going to, a little bit more of how the people were living is what we're focusing on. How did that affect, I mean, it could be culture, it could be the sense of community. I mean, there's a lot of different things that fall under social patterns. And it's, but it's going to be a lot, it's going to be more than just some of the basic things that we might think about. So how did that affect social patterns in that period? So one of the things that you need to do is look at the prompt and make sure you're answering everything they're wanting you to answer. And then you want to come up with what is my answer? And then I need to come up with an answer. So let me think about what my answer would be. Now you've got several different countries you could pick from. You could pick Spanish, French, and British, like the answer choice, like the thesis says. Or you could, you have Portugal, you have the Netherlands. You can, so you have different options. And in this case, the person writing this picked Spanish, French, and British. Okay, so how did those territories do that? And I cannot urge you enough to outline. Does anyone hate outlining? Does anybody like an outline phobe? Like, I don't want to do that. It's weird, Heather. It's weird because I see a lot of students that feel that way, and they're like, I don't want to do an outline. It takes too long. But the thing is that it takes a really long time to be, meandering around too. And so I had a student one time who she really struggled with essays, and as she was, as we were working through things, we tried to get her to outline and all of that. Her final essay that I worked with her, I thought she had it. Like, I was reading the opening and the first paragraph, and I was like, oh man, finally everything came together. That second paragraph, there was this example she used that I don't know where she was going with it. I don't think she knew where she was going with it. And so she spent the next paragraph and a half explaining why she used that example and how it fit in. And then the time ran out, and that was basically the end. And I was like, you didn't outline, did you? And she's like, no. Outlining can avoid that, because you can sit there and look at it and go, that's not really good. But the problem that comes into our minds a lot of times is this stream of consciousness, where I'm just going to write what comes in my head. I'll organize it in my head, and then I'll write it. Then you start repeating things, making generalizations, choosing poor examples. outlines are the way to go. You've got to outline. When I'm not teaching and hanging out with my kids and all that, I also do write. And I've got to outline. That's one of the things I'm finding as I'm working on a book that I'm working on. I have a huge, it's on the computer, so it's as big as my monitor, but it's like this big board with just cards all over it, virtual cards, showing characters, plot, all of this stuff, so I can keep track of everything. So always outline. And in this case, this person did each country, goals, methods, results. And so you're going to see that benefit of knowing those different territories and their different motivations. You can put that in there, come up with strong examples, and then you'll have a really strong essay. Never, ever, 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 ever leave off a conclusion. Sorry. Again, it's jumped. Never leave off a conclusion. That's the last thing they're going to read. You don't want it to stink at the end. So, in our book, that if you get the book, it's got this like high scoring response. You can read and see exactly kind of like what you would be going for if you're wanting a really highly scored essay, which you would want because it contributes to your test. You can read it and see, oh, that's what I should have, And the nice thing is like if you're reading this, it's not like the person is like talking near there, and then therefore and anti-disestablishmentarianism and all these big words. That's not happening. It's just written well and organized, and that's going to be what they're looking for. Plus, the book will also, as you can see, it has like the rubric for how it gets graded, and so you can check that out. One thing I wanted to show you today before it's like, whoa, we're going crazy. Before we got into some questions, I wanted to show you something that may be encouraging to you. So here's the thing. I have a senior, I have a sophomore. And so they're and a sixth grader. I didn't forget the sixth grader. It didn't apply to him because he's not in high school. This whole thing that's going on, it sucks. It really does. I know it's like, even as much as people don't like school, you'd rather be at school, and it's awesome that you get some extra time to study, but it's thanks. You're missing out on stuff. My senior is just like heartbroken. It's terrible. But there still are things that you can do and to get ready. The AP the College Board is going to do the tests somehow. We're supposed to find out tomorrow, kind of like what they're planning. They said March 20th was they're going to give us more information. So we'll find out tomorrow what exactly they're going to do. But they've said all along, we're going to make sure you get the credit for the classes. You have the opportunity to take the tests. So I don't know how it's going to look, but it's going to look like something. But like you can see, 2 month, 1 month, 2 week, this little thing that this cut up, you can, if you whatever one you would follow, you can see like how much work you need to put in if you're 2 weeks out, 1 month out, 2 months out. And so no matter how close you get, there's actually a way to improve. And so that's pretty nifty, coming up with a study plan. This is just a really cool resource that is in the book. And like it even shows you what you should be studying each day and stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure that you guys saw that, and I want to try to show it each day so that people can like screenshot it or something, so that they can follow along. And like, man, it's even though things are not going the way I want them to, there are still things I can do to finish the year well and get a good grade on these tests. So Carlos, that's one of the things obviously they're thinking about. I have no idea. I don't know how they're going to get around that. because immediately if you say you can take it at home, then, you know, people are going to find a way to not behave. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow. But they have said all along that they are planning on making sure that people are able to take the test and get the credits. You know, my oldest, my senior, he does those as well. And so he's got a couple of AP classes that he's wanting to take his stuff on because he wants to get credit for it when he goes to college next year. All right. So before we go, let's do a couple of, sorry, I just was getting to the right point here. Let's just do a couple extra questions. We've got some extra ones here. These, like I said, these are directly out of our book. So take, I'm going to give you a minute to read the little passage here by Senator Cochran, and then we'll look. I'll give you 30 seconds for each question, just like we did earlier. Okay. So let's go for it. Senator Cochran seems like a groovy guy. What? What? This is terrible. This is that propaganda machine that they were coming up with these ideas of what the people look like over here. The blatant racism, prejudice, awful, terrible. But this is what, you know, the mindset was. And he was basically, he's praising Columbus. He's saying the old world with its prejudices and barbarism, basically, you know, the whole that the natives were savages and never could be trusted. They couldn't have possibly brought such a powerful, amazing thing here. What? Awful, terrible, terrible guy. I don't even know Senator Cochran, and I don't like him. So that's going to be something that you're going to have in your mind as you look at the questions. So again, let me give you 30 seconds to answer 4, and then we'll do 5, and then we'll do 6, and then we'll be done for the day. So number 4. All right, 30 seconds in. Here we go. Which of the following most directly? Guys, remember what we said. Read the question. There's clues in the question. This is what we got to pay attention to most directly. Most directly. That's not working. Hang on a second. Pre-draw my pen. There we go. Most directly. All of them could, when you see something like that, all 4 answers could have caused that trend or helped to cause that trend. But we're asking for the one that most directly caused the trend. And then when we do that, it's going to be answer choice D. Answer choice D, that most directly did it. A, yeah, that A plays into D. But was that as common? No, that was one type of way that the diseases hit. There was also a lot of unintentional spread. And so that's the thing to think about. D is more general. A is so specific. That's not going to be the most direct thing. All right. Another 30 seconds for number 5. Go for it. Okay, so this one says during the period of cultural exchange, American Indian societies were most significantly, hey, there it is again, most significantly. So not just impacted, but most significantly impacted. And the beavers, they were there. They were already planting. The horses and sheep, this is what ends up being the biggest impact, because that changed the way they hunted, that changed the way that they were able to explore and travel, and it made them more nomadic, actually. And so that was the biggest introduction, was going to be the horses and sheep. So good job, good job. One more. Let's do number 6 together, and then we'll talk about it. All right, last one, number 6. Which of the following represents the largest population flow? Largest population flow. Again, all of them are going to be population flows, but which of them is the largest flow? Going through again, eliminating immigration, they both, yeah, they brought people, but you're thinking of the number of people on each ship kind of thing. Versus the migration of American Indian tribes, that also is a very large group, but it does not compare to the number of people who were involved in the slave trade, the number of them. Because I mean, think about it, by the time the Civil War rolls around, the population is over half Black. And so those ships had hundreds and hundreds of people in them. And so they're going to be the ones that are bringing the most people, moving the most people, is going to be that particular process. All right. So that's how we end it. Tomorrow we're going to be back. Tomorrow we get to talk about the birth of the nation kind of thing, and our first 2 little historical figures that you might see on the right of your screen will play a role in that. So I've had a great time. I love history. I love talking about it, love teaching it. Thanks for hanging out with us and participating in the chat. Thank you, Heather, for being in there, answering and guiding and all of that. And at the top of the hour, we're going to be doing biology. So have a good afternoon, and then I'll see you tomorrow.